Welcome to our conversation today about the Bridges of Madison County. I'm Bob Hupp. I'm the Rep's Producing Artistic Director. We're so glad to be here. We want to thank the Clinton School for hosting us. I don't know how many times we've been here. It's been a lot. And we see a lot of familiar faces, so I'm so glad you guys came out to join us in this conversation about the next show that's opening tomorrow night at Arkansas Rep, the Bridges of Madison County. And to talk about the Bridges of Madison County today, we are joined by some members of our team, and I'll let them introduce themselves, and I'll start down there with Mark.
Hello, my name is Mark Benz. I'm the musical director for Bridges.
You got to pass the mic there.
Hi guys, how are you? Thanks for coming out today. I'm Michael Halling, and I play Robert Kincaid.
Hi, I'm Joan Hess. I play Francesca Johnson.
Good morning, afternoon. My name is Noah Racy. I play Bud.
Bud Johnson.
Bud Johnson, sorry.
Mark is our musical director. Mark, how many shows have you done at the Rep?
That I've worked on. This is my 30th production. So
30th production.
yeah, I think.
And you just turned 30 years old.
I just turned 30 years old. I did. So it kind of timed out perfectly. As far as musical directing, you know, I've worked in various capacities on different shows. I think this is my 9th one to music direct, 8th or 9th. I don't remember.
A lot.
Yeah.
Right. And this is Michael Hollings. This is your first show.
My first show here.
And Noah's first show here.
Likewise.
And this is Joan's second show here. If you are a long-time Rep attendee, you saw Joan years ago in a play called Born Yesterday that Cliff Baker directed. And that was how many years ago? 9 years ago. But if you went to the Symphony's Valentine's Day concert last year, you saw Joan perform with our symphony at Valentine's Day when they were performing at Pulaski Academy. Clea and I went and saw your performance there, which was quite wonderful. So we're very glad to have this very distinguished group with us. The Bridges of Madison County, how many of you have read the book or seen the movie? That's almost everybody. And it was turned into a musical by Jason Robert Brown, the composer, and Marcia Norman, the playwright, Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright, in 2013, or at least it was produced by the Williamstown Theater Festival in August of 2013. Like most musicals, like almost any play that comes to Broadway, it had its life in nonprofit theater before it had a life in commercial theater. And so the Bridges of Madison County is no exception. It was produced at the Williamstown Theater Festival, which with much of the same cast, except for the lead, female lead, the role of Francesca Johnson, which was played on Broadway by Kelly O'Hara, who just won the Tony this past year for Best Actress. She was in the process of having one of her children, I guess her second child. She was unable to do the original production at Williamstown, but she opened on Broadway with a stellar cast. And one of the unique sort of pieces of information about the Bridges of Madison County on Broadway was that one of the producers of the production was Little Rock's own Remel Dickinson. And Remel had produced other plays on Broadway, including Memphis and 39 Steps. He is the presenting sponsor of our production at the Rep. And so we're very thrilled to have Remel's connection to us. He also was a sponsor of our production of Memphis. And I think also sponsored 39 Steps. Is that correct, Fran? And so it's great to have his connection because he has all of the insights, and he brought us all of the Bridges of Madison County swag that he got when he was working as a producer on that production. The musical won 2 Tonys in 14, but it only ran for 137 performances, which is not the number of performances that people like Rem Dickinson and others who were the producers wanted it to run. They would like it to still be running on Broadway. So it presented a challenge on Broadway for a variety of reasons, and it closed. And of course, like most Tony-winning Broadway musicals, it embarked on a national tour, which is where it is now. It's on its national tour. In fact, Joan's husband, David, is on that national tour. It will be in Arkansas, coincidentally, at the same time we're doing our production here in Little Rock. It'll be up in Fayetteville, running, I think, next weekend. Is that right? They're going to be in Fayetteville next weekend, 2 weeks from now, which is fabulous timing. It is unusual, and in fact shouldn't be the case, that a regional theater is doing a musical that's on a national tour, and in fact, when it's on its first national tour. And so the other unique thing, among the many reasons to come see the Bridges of Madison County at the Rep, has to do with the fact that this is the regional theater premiere of the Bridges of Madison County. No other regional theater got the rights first. We lobbied hard and were successful in getting the rights before there was even a script. I remember last year at this time, a little before this time, lots of negotiation. Where are we going to get the rights? Where we're not going to get the rights? How close was the tour coming to Little Rock? And when we did finally nail down the rights, we were very excited because I loved the show when I saw it in New York. And they couldn't even send us a perusal copy. Usually when you're getting the rights to a musical, they send you the script so you can look at it and see what the casting needs are, the production needs, the orchestrations and things like that. They couldn't send us anything because they hadn't been written yet. So we really were doing this play on my memory of the Broadway show, which is not the same show. There are changes to the tour that we discovered when we got the book. Went, oh, that's different, okay. But that's how new it was and how fresh it was that we didn't even get the script until literally we went into auditions, which was just a few months ago. So it's exciting to be doing the premiere of this musical. A lot of theaters have announced their seasons for 16, 17, and there are a number of theaters that are doing the musical subsequently, but you guys will get to see it first, and we're excited about that. This is a cast of 14, so it's a small musical, and I'm directing it because there's no choreography. Now I loved the play when I saw it, and I really wanted to bring it to our audiences here in Little Rock. And let me begin. I want to ask Mark, our musical director, and you know, in the structure of how a musical is brought to life, you have your director and your musical director. And the musical director is in charge of the music and this play is so beautifully sung, and the music is so complex and so interesting that the musical director's job is essential and critical. So Mark not only works with the singers to craft the sound of the show, he also is in charge of the orchestra with the musicians who will be playing. So tell us a little bit about the music for the Bridges of Madison County.
Yeah, well, it's lush. It's beautiful. It's lush. Lush is the word I always come back to. It's just honest to God, one of the most gorgeous scores I've encountered and have been privileged to play. It's a thrill to play. First of all, I'm a huge fan of Jason Robert Brown. I've directed his shows before. I did Last 5 Years a couple years ago, which is a gorgeous score. So I would jump at any chance to do another Jason Robert Brown musical. I love the way he writes, and he's so modern and contemporary. He's only in his 40s now, so he's very, very much a force in the theater world today. And I first heard the score, I guess, it's been, right when it came out on Broadway, and I heard a song that Michael sings called "It All Fades Away," and I was immediately captivated. It's just such a human score. It's simple but elegant. The orchestration is, I have a 6-piece string section, which we've never had at the Rep before. Usually, you know, we don't get live strings, and we kind of did for this show. It's a 6-piece beautiful string section. The show opens with a simple, poignant cello solo, and as Francesca walks out on stage, and it's beautiful. I play piano while I conduct or attempt to conduct. I can't get my hands up a lot, but I play piano, and there's 2 guitarists in the show. One doubles on mandolin. Francesca's an Italian character, so often when you hear her sing of Italy, you hear the mandolin come in, playing a very kind of Italian nuanced theme. And I think that's it. Yeah,
well, you went out. Tell us about when you went out to California to see the show.
Yeah, so I didn't get to see it on Broadway because it didn't run for long on Broadway, and I'm a local guy. I live down here, so when I heard it was going on tour and I had just been asked to music direct it, I jumped at the chance to go see it, and the only chance that I had was in LA, so I went out to LA, and I got in touch with David, Joan's husband, and said, "Hey, David, I'm going to come see the show. What do you think the chances are of, like, talking to Jason about the score and getting to maybe sit in the pit, because Joan was I'm Facebook friends with Joan and I saw she got to sit in the pit, so I was like, I should be able to too, So David got right back with me. He said, sure, Jason would love to have you, so tell me when you're coming. So we got it all set up, and I got to experience. He was conducting the LA leg of the tour, which is a rare experience in itself. I mean, how many times do you get to sit in a pit that's conducted by the composer? Imagine Beethoven conducting one of his symphonies. It was just one of those experiences for me, and being a lifelong JRB fan, it was pretty big. And just the quality of the sound, being bathed in that warmth, it's such an immersive score.
What advice did he give you when you saw him out there?
He's kind of a snarky fellow, Jason Robert Brown is, and so and he definitely has that reputation. And I found him to be very polite and very nice, and he was easy to talk to. But one thing he said was, "Don't screw this score up with an electric keyboard." So, I had already heard the score before, and I knew if I could get it, I would love to have a live grand piano to play, because I think the score just evokes that. There's a depth and a timbre of a grand piano that you can't match on an electric keyboard. And so I went to the powers that be and say, hey, Jason Robert Brown says we need a grand piano on this show. Can we get one? And I got one. So we have a grand piano in I call it our pit. We actually play on the second stage, where we start rehearsals for the first 2 weeks, and then after the first 2 weeks are over, the orchestra moves into that space. We're on the second mezzanine level, and so we're set up in there, and we're in full swing right now.
One of the cool things about when you come and hear this production of the Bridges of Madison County, and you hear the music that Mark is conducting and our musicians are creating, ordinarily, when we get a score, we cut it down, or we program the keyboards to cover different instruments, because oftentimes the instrumentation calls for 15, 16 or more musicians, and we never have that. One of the very cool things about Bridges of Madison County is it was written for 10 musicians, and we have 10 musicians. And so you're going to be hearing the score exactly as it was written, not as it's had to be. And every regional theater does this. You have to make compromises with the big Broadway scores. But in this production, there are no compromises. It's the music the way it was written. And our sound guys have done a fantastic job balancing the music and the actors' voices to really create the kind of oral experience that you rarely have in regional theater, and I've rarely experienced at the Rep. This music that and I can't emphasize this enough about the way the music elevates the storytelling in complex ways. And we talk about the way that, for instance, the way that minor and major chord shifts happen in the music, the way that, for instance, Michael's character Robert Kincaid is slight. There are in terms of where the downbeat is and when he starts to sing, about just to create that emotional landscape. And let me talk about that with Michael, about the music, because you have the first song that you sing is just slightly off, and it creates that sense of unease. Talk about that.
Yeah, it's great. Well, once I find the downbeat, then I can basically play against it. It's kind of like once you have the rules, you can break them. Absolutely, and that's absolutely what he was going for. I think any great writer, any great composer knows the emotionality of the character that he's writing for, he or she is writing for, and can play that up and really find that essence, and then write for that. And that's really, essentially, what it is a restlessness. It's a wandering soul. That's the kind of person that Robert Kincaid is, and then he suddenly meets Francesca, and all hell breaks loose, and he finds himself. But and that's what the music is until those sort of worlds collide, and then it becomes a little more, I guess, melodic, a little simpler, a little more. A coupling and a sort of a major sort of feel, like you've landed, like you've arrived somehow. But until then, it's always just a Am I there? And it is shown in the rhythm and the tempos, and it's exciting. It's exciting as a singer to be able to play with that, to have that to have that shaky ground, because it really kind of informs the character musically. So
Good. Let me ask Joan. Many of us are familiar with the book. Some of us have seen Meryl Streep's performance in the role in the film. What attracts you? What caused you to want to be a part of this production? What caused you to want to to portray this character in this musical? What draws you to the character, this Italian war bride, adulteress, farm wife?
Oh, gosh. Well, I was lucky enough to see the show on Broadway. I had not read the book. I had seen the film, and I remembered really loving the film, but it had been, some time. I hadn't seen it since
That's because
I think probably since it was released.
Let me back up a little bit here.
And I fell in love with it, seeing the show. I thought it was such a beautiful human story of heart and complex choices and those bridges that are there to either be crossed or not. The bridges where you leave the safety of your own shores to perhaps discover new lands, or choose not to do that. I thought it was just such a glorious story, beautifully, compellingly, vividly, transcendently told, and told also through this extraordinary score. I also just was transported by the score, and I thought, oh my gosh, I have to play that part. And then I actually was inspired by the music and started working on one of the pieces from the show. I never do that. I'm kind of not like that. And so, but I was inspired. So I started working on one of the pieces, and as soon as I heard the rep was doing it, my husband and I both reached out and said, hey, we'd be interested in being seen for this. And so I felt really, really grateful that you guys were receptive to that idea, and then had a wonderful time with you in the room and auditioning for it. It was just beautiful material to work on. It's just, it really opens my heart, this material. I think it's really beautifully written and realized, and a story that is, rather universal. I mean, at our core, we all want to love and be loved, and this is a story about love. So how could I not be attracted to it? It's an incredible journey to take, and you really sort of start at the beginning of Francesca's. She sings to you about, I sing to you about my journey at the very beginning of the play, and where I came from, being this war bride in Naples and coming to Iowa, being brought to Iowa by this guy, a soldier from the States, and setting up a home and building this family. And we live a very simple life out on farmland in middle America, and it's a settled life. But then this tornado happens by way of a National Geographic photographer coming into town. And wow, also just connecting with all those things that you don't realize that are dormant within you, that you might have lost a piece of, that you might have, left behind, and someone sparks that within you, and you suddenly feel more alive and more yourself than ever before. And you think, how could I not want to live like this? And then having to grapple with that and make decisions based on that, and the consequences that causes within the family and the community. And so it's just a complex, delicious, multi-dimensional journey I get to take. I just feel super grateful every day. I've felt so fortunate to be in this rehearsal room with a fantastic company of actors and creatives, and every night now I feel super grateful to just go out and live this journey and keep discovering it.
Now, when they're hearing you speak right now, but when they come and see you in the production, you won't sound anything like you're sounding right now. because you mentioned that, and we know the story. We know that Francesca moved to Iowa when she married Bud after the war, and she came to Iowa from Italy. Talk about the preparation for that. How did you work on that? That's something you came to the rehearsal process. You had done a lot of work on your own. Is it difficult to sustain that sort of, because you have the balance of knowing that she is Italian and that she's going to have an Italian accent, but also the responsibility of making sure that what she says is very clear to the audience, that you understand what she says. And it's my job to make sure she's clear, but it's your job to make sure she's credible. So how does an actor work on that process and incorporate that? I asked her during the rehearsal process if she was starting to dream with an Italian accent, because she does it so convincingly. But talk about, as an actor, share your process with the folks here about that.
I really love performing with accents because I seem to have an ear for them, and I think it's really fascinating to explore them and explore another culture and what makes them speak the way they speak. So I find it really fascinating and really fun, but it's also one of the most challenging parts of a role for me, if I get a role that has a foreign dialect, because it's really easy to allow the dialect to take you out of yourself and not be able to use your whole instrument to make it a real human being. So it's a longer integration process for me. So that's why I started really early on with the dialect. And, I continue to work it, but, I just do my own research on the dialect. I was lucky enough to, be able to talk to people who spend a lot of time in Italy. I did research online and so forth. But yeah, I started with it very early on to try to make that integration, ultimately get it so that it becomes second nature, so then I can really show up to the process with everything that's my instrument as well. And I feel grateful that I can totally trust Bob to let me know what's coming across, what's intelligible to the audience, and what needs to be clearer and so forth. So I felt in great hands from the beginning. But it's quite a process, but really rewarding. This is what we love. We're artists. We love this stuff.
No, let me ask you a question. This is one of the things we've talked about. Whenever the plot of the play where this handsome stranger arrives in town and turns everything upside down, and everything that we took for granted is no longer an assumption that we can make. And one of the things that I like about this musical is that the play doesn't give us a good guy and a bad guy. It gives us choices. It gives us very important reasons to make either decision. It puts us as audience members in a position where we don't have to choose, that's the bad guy, that's the good guy. We can put ourselves and say, what would I do in Francesca's situation? Noah plays Bud Johnson, the husband, and we talked often about how there are no bad guys. There's, we don't necessarily, we may be happy that Francesca's found a connection with another human, but at the same time, we like her family, and we see some of Bud's struggles. Talk about that sense of creating a character that we don't root against, but that we root for, who may not come out on top, but is also not a loser. Talk about creating this character in this play for yourself.
Yeah, yes, and more yes. I totally, this to me is why the show is good, because I'm in it. No, it's, but this character really is, I'm sure you guys have seen so many different stories that have a really simple, I hate that person, I like that person, and the show ends and you applaud because it was good. This show doesn't have that, like Bob was saying. To me, this is why the show is as good as it is, because it doesn't cop out in that way. It doesn't give you the easy answer for you to look at Francesca and say, of course, he's mean, he yelled at you earlier and hits you probably, and go with him because he's sexy, and there are no easy answers in that way. That's why I took this show. That's why I came to do this, because that's why, to me, the piece is as strong as it is. It's so human, and in making Bud a full, fleshed out human being, who brilliantly, Marsha Norman wrote the book, brilliantly sets up for a contemporary ear, a contemporary human listening to this. You hear this man say things that now we're like, duh, he's doing it. He's doing what we all want to have happen in a relationship. He's doing it in his way, but he's trying. He's making these efforts in these really simple human ways to reach out to his wife. So in that balance, she has to make this really tough decision, and that's why I think it's got such strength about it. It has you can watch a human being struggle with something. When you watch a human being making a really stupid, simple decision about go with somebody nice or someone who hits you, you're like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. But to see someone, to see her struggle with what life has offered her is that much more poignant and that much more powerful, I think, because I'm not the cop-out. Does that make sense?
Yes. Not the cop-out. Yes, that makes...
Yeah.
Well, it's the thing that attracted me to the play is that it doesn't provide easy answers, and it lets Francesca, be the agent of her own destiny. She has opportunity, and she makes choices, and she gives up something, and she would have given up something either way, and so the choices that she makes might not be the choices some of us would have made, might have been, maybe some of us are glad she makes the choices that she makes, others feel like we wish she had made another choice, but that level of interest engaged me as a director. We started out our conversations with the actors in the first days of rehearsal talking about our own lives and our own connections to how choices changed the trajectory of our life. About, could we envision something, a choice that we didn't make, something where we chose this path and left this path unexplored, and what would our lives have been like if we had taken that other path? And these are the ideas that this musical brings home, I think, and why this musical is worth telling on our stage.
I think it's also, if I can add to it, I think there's a really beautiful, it touches on a really interesting line between generational differences too, where I'm sure any number of people in this room have watched younger generations feel like they've discovered something new that's never happened before, and all of these choices that they get to make are just so extraordinary, and most people have been through them. But there's something about what this play does that asks, how many different things do you think you should have happen in your life? How many different options do you have in your life to make all of these different stories come true throughout your lifetime? I'm probably garbling this, but it's, to me, one of the beautiful points in the show is where she is looking at both these two decisions, and I don't know, that to me is something that our generations now have so many choices. And they've created a world where, they're going to, create anything they want in some way. And they feel like this has never happened before. And this story sits so strongly in younger generations and older generations. I think it's universal what it touches on.
When you come and see the play, and you see the story that these three characters, the sort of triangle created by these three characters, you will see the design by Mike Nichols, who has designed so many shows for us. You'll see a certain abstraction on the stage that at first I think takes some figuring out, and I want to give you a little insight into that when you come and see the play. Like a lot of contemporary shows, the Bridges of Madison County is, and because it is based on a book and based on a movie, there are so many scenes, so many settings in the play. It's cinematographic in that way. You start out in the farmhouse, which these characters construct. You go from the farmhouse to the bridge, to a car, to a truck, to the neighbor's house, to the front porch, to the pump in the backyard. There are so many different locations. How does a designer capture those locations on our 40 by 26 by 35 foot space? How do we create all of these locations, and how do we honor what the playwright set up for the play to be envisioned? And that is, she says that when she tells the story, her influence philosophically, was the playwright Thornton Wilder. Now, you know Thornton Wilder because he wrote Our Town. And if you've ever seen a production of Our Town, you know that it's very minimal, that the actors create the environment, that the playwright demands of the audience to bring their imagination to the equation and create the environments that the actors are hinting at, or that the design is hinting at. That philosophy is very specific and very intentional to engage us in our own imaginative life as we see these stories come to life on our stage. So Marcia Norman, in the construction of this musical, followed that philosophy, and we've tried to honor that in the design of our production. So when you come and see this production, the first thing you'll be struck by is the sculptural element that Mike Nichols has designed, and that is evocative of lots of things. It is evocative of a bridge. It is evocative of the landscape, the vista of Iowa. It is evocative of the memory of that thing, that is Francesca's life, and how her life is perhaps not what she expected it to be. It is also evocative of, many people have said it looks like a tornado, which is appropriate. Some people have said it looks like an exploded farmhouse, which is appropriate given what happens inside that farmhouse. And so, with like all good design, you will bring your own opinion to it based on your own set of experiences. But this design gives us the opportunity to move quickly through space. This play is set in Winterset, Iowa in 1965. And so it's a cast of 14. And so what we've tried to do is give this sense of community, give this relationship, this triangle context in small town Iowa in 1965. So you'll see the actors, the ensemble, very engaged in creating the environment. And that's also intentional. We could have gotten out and hired a bunch of stagehands to come in and do all of that. But it was more important that the actors do that, so you get a sense of this community building their lives and depending upon each other, for better or worse. That the fact that they all know each other's business when this guy comes in out of nowhere and disrupts the whole community. And so when you're watching the play, you can look at the physical movement of the play as a sort of an intentional construction, trying to honor what the playwright set out for us to do, and giving you the sense that there is a community here and that this play is unfolding in the context of that community. We talked, Michael, about the stranger who comes into town and throws a wrench in everything. Talk a little bit about this character, and we know if we saw the film, we saw Clint Eastwood create the character. You're considerably younger than Clint Eastwood and a few years, but talk a little bit about your role in this community that we're talking about, in this triangle.
Well, he is, in one sense, the fly in the ointment, because when he arrives, things kind of change for the central character. But one of the great things I like about it is that he is a misfit. Ultimately, he doesn't know this, but so is she, and they sort of begin to find that out about each other, is that they are these two peas in a pod in this other world that she is happily ensconced in until he arrives, and then suddenly starts to, sort of separate herself a little bit from it. And so my vantage point as Robert Kincaid, as a photographer, is as an observer of this world, which is, for him, what he's always known. He travels the world taking pictures. He's a roving soul. He's a roving spirit. And suddenly he meets her and he wants to, he either wants to, we don't really know, but settle down in whatever way that means with her in some capacity. And so this traveler by nature, this vagabond, suddenly changes on a dime. And that's a beautiful thing when you get to play a character who can have that shift. And that's the complexity that Noah and Joan are talking about in these characters. And that's what they've given us, is these incredibly dimensional people, real human beings. Everyone in this room has these sorts of memories and probably, things that we know only to ourselves that we can discuss with probably very few people or nobody, where you've had these things happen. And that's what's great about this play. And for me, that's what's great about this character, is it's as much an awakening for him as it is, I think, for her, in terms of what he has lost and what he has now gained the moment he meets her.
Now I'm going to ask you guys, I'm going to ask you and Joan a personal question. You know where I'm going with it. No. Okay, well, when you've seen the film, or you've read the book, when you come to see the play, there are some very intimate moments in this play, particularly in the second act.
You mean with the bed?
Yeah, there's lots
of things that happen in the bed. Is that what you're getting at?
There's lots of bed staging, and in the rehearsal process, I felt very voyeuristic, sitting 4 feet away from their bed, going, "Move your leg more like that."
Wait.
I never said that.
He says he's not a choreographer.
That's right. I found a new skill set that I hope to exploit someday. But you guys are asked to become very intimate. Now you're both, in real life, you're both married to other people, but yet, you have to be honest in your, you're in a bed, you're barely dressed, you got microphones all over your body, you're all wired up. You hardly got.
That's a recipe for romance right there.
Yeah, I mean. And we have to be careful, in the staging so that it doesn't get. I think this is a PG-13 kind of play, is what I would say. But talk. How do you do that? I mean, do you shake hands? Hi, let's get in bed. I mean, what?
Well, a lot of pretending had to happen. It's one of the side benefits. Honestly, it's made easier because you're working with a creative individual who is willing to kind of go there with you and be open to, kind of looking like a fool in front of a room full of people who are watching you do these sorts of intimate things. The play necessitates that. It sort of dictates that. And so, like anything good, it leads up to that, so you don't have to be nervous about it, essentially. But so it's there's a comfortability that comes from the practicality of just doing it, I guess I'd say. And then, of course, it's beautiful to be able to live in that place as an actor, and tell the story and fall in love on stage. It's a nice feeling.
Yeah, we're again total gift. Mm-hmm. This is what a blessing to be able to fall in love. Thank you for casting Michael Holling.
I'm like an artistic, Tinder account or something.
That's right. You never know what you'll get. You walk into your first rehearsal, you have no idea what your leading man will be like as a person, as an actor, as an artist, and how they work. So, that's part of the fun of it. Sometimes that's part of the frustration of it. Sometimes you get someone who you don't mesh with very well or works very differently than you, which can be okay. Sometimes it can be a real drag. Luckily, Michael and I like each other. That was helpful. And then work very similarly. So that was really helpful. And I really feel like there was a level of safety created in our rehearsal space for us to be able to go there. And we come with that too, just trusting. It's definitely a trust exercise and an exercise in vulnerability.
Very much.
And we continue to discover.
Yeah, and dovetailing on that, Bob mentioned that we did an exercise of talking about choices we've made in our own lives to, kind of represent the play's essential theme. And those are the sorts of things that make you comfortable with the people you work with anywhere. And so that trust exercise, it was like a great trust fall, in a sense, where we learned a lot about each other in the day two. It was, and I mean a lot, and I'm very profound, deep, poignant sharing, which I've never done, and I was ecstatic. And I went home and I told my wife, and I said, I'm blessed. This is a gift to be able to do this show, and under these circumstances, with this kind of early preparation and release of sort of the trappings that can happen when you start a show, it was a beautiful way to start. And that is a beautiful way to start a show like this, where you have this incredibly complex relationship and all of the clothes that come off afterward.
Yeah. Well,
And emotional clothes that come off.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, anybody who knows me knows I'm all about sharing. Let's open up for questions. What would you guys like to ask? Yes, ma'am. And I think they're going to bring some mics around for you.
You mentioned that they made changes from the Broadway production to the traveling. Were they significant in any way?
Not materially significant. One of the big changes was that there's nudity in the Broadway show and no nudity in our production. There's implied nudity in our production, but no actual. In the Broadway show, there was flat out, oh wow, she's buck naked up there. That was a big change. Do you guys notice any other changes? Did you notice any other changes?
I didn't see it.
I mean, musically, before Broadway, it started at the Williamstown Festival, and there were several songs that wound up eventually getting cut. And so when you come to the script now, that was some of it was intact from the early stages, and some of it was not, and at times it didn't match up. Like there were some scenes we ran into that didn't quite make sense because the song had been cut and we didn't understand the intention of certain things, and some things had to be tweaked in that way. But so yeah, and that tends to happen oftentimes in previews of a Broadway show. You know, they'll have a song that eventually gets cut before opening night, and so there are definitely some musical differences, and some transitions have been tightened, and yeah.
Yeah, there's a stage direction in our script that talks about their daughter, whose name is Carolyn, that she comes onto stage and finds an airmail letter that she takes and secretes off with herself. And there was no other reference in the entire show to that letter, or why she got it, or why we cared, or why it should be in the play. And one of you, was it you? You wrote to Jason Robert Brown and said, "What's up with this airmail letter?" Right? And what did he write back and say to you?
It was before Broadway opened, and they have all these stage directions in it that they put in the prompt book for the script. And one of the developments that they cut out was a connection between our daughter and Francesca's sister, Chiara, in Italy, and they had a correspondence that was going on unbeknownst to us. So that
which totally went away.
There was a song involved. I guess Chiara saying something about their relationship, and all of that was culled out to streamline the eventual storyline.
But they had forgotten to take it out of the script that they sent to us. And so we took it out, and maybe in subsequent productions they'll take it out, but it was a random stage direction that made no sense, and we were very lucky to have direct contact with the source to find out. We would never have figured that out. Yes, Patrick. I'll go over here, and then I'll come over to you, Connie.
You've just completed 3 weeks of rehearsal. You're in 3 preview performances right now, first time before a live audience. Tomorrow night's opening night. And then you perform, another 4 weeks of the show? So I'm 3. So I'm kind of interested in the state of mind of an actor and how it progresses through that. Like, how is it different in previews right now? How is your mind going to be different on opening night? And then how is it 2 weeks into the show? What changes either in your performance or your state of mind as you move through that continuum?
I think Bob put it perfectly yesterday in a note session. He was talking about he said it was, you guys are just terrified enough right now, and there's something to it where there's kind of a tightrope walking feeling where, as the lines get really solidified into your body and the blocking and everything that is this ballet you're creating, it gets more and more sure. But it isn't sure at the top. So it's a process of weeding out fear and having it get less terrified. I feel like we're in a great place as far as our rehearsal process, and that's big kudos to Bob. A lot of directors. Not all directors know how to pace out a rehearsal time. That's a big part of the skill of a director, but getting to where everyone feels like they're hitting a really solid stride in this period of the previews into opening is really tricky. For me, it's exactly what you said yesterday about it's a level of, is that line going to be there when it's time to say it? And you'd think that we have some magic potion because we're actors, we don't have to do that. But no, that's kind of just what it is. There is a sense of you grab a thread at the top of the play and you start pulling it, and the lines come because you're doing this physical life that lives this way, and then this is said here because I'm turning towards you here, and it all starts to make a kind of beautiful sense. But it is not without fear. And that to me is where, right now, where I'm at, is it's, because there's an arrogance that can take over when the fear goes away that you can really mess up because you're like, I got this, and then you start saying crazy stuff because so it's a balance, it's a real fine balance. Right now, where it's feeling really comfortable, and there have been just enough little changes and edits and making things stronger to keep you on edge. That's where I am, and I have about 1/20th of the lines that these two have. So I'll turn that over to you guys.
Well, I have been sort of eating up this whole process because it's such a beautiful piece to work on. So I frankly was sad leaving the rehearsal room because it's such, I love the process of rehearsal and discovering a piece and discovering each other and how this story, what this story means, personalizing it, where we go with each other. So it was a little sad to leave the rehearsal space, but it was also fantastic and glorious to start living in the space where we would realize this story and tell this story and take on all the creative elements, the set and the costumes, the sound, hearing the full orchestra. Oh, one of the best days in any artist's process of rehearsal is hearing the orchestrations and the orchestra play it live for you for the first time, and it fills it out all that much more. But it's so interesting in this process of going through the technical rehearsals and then into previews and now sharing it with a community and having them have reaction and us feeling their energy and feeding off of each other is a whole other layer of the process. But at the same time, we're still layering in and continuing. We've made some rather significant shifts this week in just in telling different layering dimensions of the relationships in. And it just is a continuous exploration. If you ask me, I mean, as an artist, I just feel like it's an ever-living thing. So it will not be the same show on opening night as it will on closing night, but not because we're not telling the same story. We're telling the same story, but we're human beings who are living, breathing, changing from day to day, and we're going to bring everything we know 3 weeks later about these people into the play 3 weeks from now. So come more than once.
But yeah, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, piggybacking on what Joan was saying about the orchestra, you know, we have the actors, you know, first of all, I'm the only musician that's there from day one. So the first 2 weeks is just the cast and a piano, you know? And so we have 2 weeks, the cast has 2 weeks to rehearse this. The orchestra gets in, we have 2 days to learn the whole score. And just one rehearsal was 4 hours, another rehearsal was 3 hours. So 7 hours to learn the whole score, right? So you hope you hired professionals who can just, you know, do it like that. And so in answer to your question about previews and the mindset as far as that's concerned, I love having these previews because the orchestra is still kind of a new element, you know? And there's things that we definitely tweak during previews. I tweaked some of the tempos for last night's preview, for instance, and you know, things that are evolving and growing from there. You know, it's very nice to have these previews, and we hope, you know, it'll be all set by tomorrow night. So.
I peaked last night, so it's all downhill from here for me. No, I echo everything these guys have said so eloquently. and to add that, yeah, previews are a time for shaping and continuing to form until we freeze it, quote unquote, which is tomorrow night when we open. And then after that, it's about keeping it fresh, keeping it real, keeping it personalized, keeping it growing. I think you used whatever that word was that you used. Yeah, just allowing it to breathe and to grow. And that's the second phase, and as exciting for me as the process of rehearsal, which I absolutely adore. And I, this morning, got sad again, going to one of our press events, that we wouldn't be able to have that anymore, because I so enjoy talking about the show. So that's the challenge, and that's the beauty and the gift, is being able to do the same show every night, sometimes twice a day, and finding new things and allowing new things to come in to that world.
In the preview, or did you want to say something, Joan?
I just want to say one last thing. It occurs to me that this show is also very deceptive. It seems like it's a simple show because it's just a human show, and there's not like big dance numbers that you're choreographing and rehearsing and learning, and all this, or there's not pyrotechnics or crazy effects or anything. It's just a human story, but it's really challenging. It's a really challenging score. It's a really challenging story to be able to tell clearly and deeply and personally. And I mean, that's some of the fun of it. But if you think about it, in 3 weeks may sound like a long rehearsal period. It's so not. But in 3 weeks, we're creating entire lives. We are creating humans.
And the tour probably had 5. Right? Let's say, just in terms of the timeline of how things go, this is a much truncated version of what they had to work with. So
Right.
Take that.
Yeah, we save all of our pyrotechnics for the bedroom. This is it is a deceptively difficult show for these guys to create every night, and we're still, the previews are rehearsals. And we're still rehearsing. We'll leave this room and we'll go back and rehearse some more today as we continue to tweak and we continue to set tempos and make sure we have that communication from the musicians, though, who are several rooms away, and Mark sees them through cameras and television screens, and they see him through television screens, making sure we get those tempos right, get everything matched up, make sure we're telling the story we want to tell, making little tweaks, just slight adjustments that can have a profound impact on the story we're telling. We're still doing those things. Then once the play opens on Friday night, my job as a director is done. In fact, we're leaving town. We'll be gone for the next couple of weeks, and I won't see it again until into the third week, where it will look very different. But if I want to communicate to the actors after we open, I do that in writing through the stage manager. And the stage manager is the one who alerts me to anything that she thinks I might want to be aware of, that these actors might, which of course these actors would never do, but some actors might make changes, improvements as we call them, sarcastically. I'll be made aware from stage management if, as the play continues, I get a nightly report. We all get nightly reports where the stage manager reviews every production, every performance. She goes back to her desk after the show's down. She types up several paragraphs of a report based on what they did that night and how the audience reacted to everything. And we read those reports and we adjust accordingly if we need to. But the one good thing about this cast is they get along really well. So I trust them. I trust them to continue to be supportive of each other, which is very important and not always the case. When you come see the show, and then I will get to your question, when you come see the show, in addition to paying attention to these great actors and the set design, pay attention to the lighting design. Lighting design is by Yael Lebetsky, is pretty fantastic and is a big part of the storytelling, as the lights shift from sort of illumination to sculpting space to really the sort of a saturated nature of the color supports the romantic ideas that are evolving in Francesca's head. So the lighting is also very intentional and I think quite good, and I think you'll enjoy that aspect of it too. And we don't often get to talk about lighting. Carney, you had a question.
Bob, you alluded to reasons why the show only ran 137 times on Broadway. What were those reasons?
Well, a number of reasons. It got mixed reviews. It was up against some stiff competition. There were some weather issues in New York when it opened. There were a number of factors, and it had an all-star cast. It was well publicized, and the composer Jason Robert Brown has never had a big Broadway hit. He's beloved in the theater community and well known in certain circles, but he's not Andrew Lloyd Webber or Stephen Sondheim. And although he aspires to be, and I think he will be, because I think his music is the best theater music being written today. And you guys can chime in. You guys are more insiders than I am. But I think it was a combination of the reviews, the fact that it's not, as I said, it's not a big tap dancing musical. So if you're a tourist coming in from out of town and you're thinking, what am I going to go see? Am I going to see this happy, Shrek or whatever, or am I going to go see a more challenging show? Maybe that has factored into it. The reason the Rep is doing the play, and the reason I think it's important, is because I don't think the Bridges of Madison County is the kind of play that should be on Broadway, even though you line up great stars to be in it, and it's a wonderful story to tell. And I would put it up against just about anything else I've seen on Broadway recently. But Broadway is a commercial, for-profit enterprise designed to make money for a series of investors. It is a business like every other business there is. Its sole purpose is to make some number of people, the producers, money. That's the only reason Broadway exists. It doesn't exist for any other reason but to make people money. Nonprofit theater exists to enrich a community and to make our lives more interesting in the community that comes and supports the work. And so to me, the Bridges of Madison County is a perfect example of why we tell stories in regional theater and why we're a nonprofit organization. And speaking of which, today is Arkansas Giving Day. Do you like how I segued into that? That was... But today is Arkansas Giving Day, and so if you haven't yet, you could make a gift to support musicals like the Bridges of Madison County at Arkansas Rep by visiting the Arkansas Community Foundation's website. There's also links on our website. But there are a number of factors why it disappointed a lot of people. But to me, I think it demonstrated the shortcomings of commercial theater more than anything else. And we'll see what happens here, but I'm very proud of this work and very proud of the work that all these guys and their peers are doing at the Rep every night for the next month. And I want to thank them for joining us today. We're going to wrap up now, and thank all of you for coming today. And come down and see us at Bridges of Madison County, and please encourage your friends to come down and see the production. Thank you very much.